Please comment where you are watching in the world. Please enjoy this compilation and share your own horror stories with us. One time I was talking to this girl via MySpace that randomly friended me. I was 17 at the time, very dumb of me, and she happened to live around 15 minutes from me. She told me that her and her cousin were throwing a party at their place later, and that I should come. I was bored and recently got out of a relationship, so I thought even though I had never met this chick, it'd be a good idea to go over and try to meet some new girls. I look up the directions to her place, and I can tell it's in a backwoods area. I live in Louisiana, so I was already thinking it was sketchy, but I went with it. I find the place, and it turns out to be this really shitty looking trailer park, like some place you would definitely find a few small meth labs. I walk up, and the girl lets me in, and it's got this extremely weird feeling in the air. I sit down and start talking to the girl. She's the only one there at this point. And she was just talking about music and whatnot, and then was saying her cousin saw me on MySpace and was looking to hook up with somebody, so I could easily get lucky tonight. I was thinking that'd be awesome if the girl was attractive, I might go with it. But about 1 minute later the cousin walks in with a fucking baby attached to her tit, and comes and introduces herself to me. This chick was fairly large, and had some serious meth teeth. The area I lived around that time had some real problems with the shit, and the most country accent I had ever heard at that time. At this point I'm freaking the fuck out inside my head, because having never been in this situation, I'm just absolutely astonished. So these two girls who I've now definitely concluded are crazy are sitting there talking to me, baby still sucking on the cousin's boob, when this guy with a lazy eye walks in with one of those cardboard cup holder things you would get from McDonald's holding 4 daiquiris. I'm not even sure that this shit is actually happening when he walks in, because it seems like one of those situations you would only see in a movie. So the chick with the baby on her tit says that now that the drinks are here, it's time to party, which makes it even weirder that the plan for a party was us four. Anyway, the chick puts the baby in a car seat type thing, and puts the baby in the bathroom and shuts the door. Now I know shit is way out of hand, and I'm not even going to stick around for whatever would happen next. After the chick went and put her baby in the bathroom, the guy looks around on the entertainment center and finds some burnt CD and puts it into this really beat up looking stereo system. The reason I say stereo is because it was like, I'm having a hard time describing this, but it was pretty much a CD player that was somehow spliced together to 2 really old computer speakers. So the guy presses few buttons on the stereo player, and it starts playing this really bad techno music, and as you can imagine the quality of the speakers was horrendous. This really caught me off guard because as you can tell, these were some really white trash / redneck looking people. So they start drinking daiquiris and offer me some, to which I decline. I sat through about 1 song when the chick that just locked her baby in the bathroom, the baby was awake, by the way, got her cousin to move away from me, and she sat next to me and started rubbing my leg and was telling me how she was feeling so lonely because her and her baby daddy had just broken up and she needed a friend. This was as far as I was going to let this go, so I do that old thing where you get your phone to set off its own ringer, and I went outside to take a call. As soon as I get outside, I make a dash to my truck, open the door, turn the thing on and floored it in reverse, sending rocks from the gravel road everywhere. I hauled ass out of that trailer park. After a few minutes I guess they realized that I wasn't there, and the first girl I had talked to on MySpace kept calling my phone, but I never answered. As soon as I got home I removed her, blocked her, whatever the F you had to do on MySpace to keep somebody from seeing you. I know this may not have exactly been a date, but I classify it as such because I went in with the intent of some chick. That was the only time I ever looked on the internet for a hookup, or even gave it a single thought. To this day, I don't know what happened to those people, but I hope that baby grows up and realizes that her mother is insane. I tried to reconnect with an old flame I hadn't seen in years, and invited her to a party a coworker of mine was having. She's now a single mother, and hasn't gone out to a party in years, and accepts my invitation readily. We go the party late because she decided it was imperative that she pregame, despite my insistence this was a house party, and not a kegger, and that we weren't teenagers anymore. First thing she does is chug a beer, then slide her jeans down to expose her, but so that people could slap it. She goes hard and ends up throwing up and passing out around 8 p.m. The party started at 7. I'm cleaning up after her, embarrassed all to hell, when she wakes up and starts throwing up again, narrowly missing the trash can I had placed next to her. Eventually I get everything cleaned up, talk to her, and decide it's better to just go back to my place, and she can sleep it off in an actual bed. I put her in my car and go back for her purse. Upon my return, I discover my entire car is covered with yet more vomit. I clean that up as best I can, oh God the smell, and take her back to my place and lay her down. End of the story? No, I wish it was. She decides she can't fall asleep because her clothes are cutting off her oxygen supply, so she strips down completely nude in front of me and then passes out. This was my tiny one-room studio, so I couldn't go anywhere to give her privacy. I also only owned one blanket, and at this point it was freezing. So I stay fully clothed and lay down next to her and try to get some sleep. About 15 minutes later, she gets up and wanders to the other side of the studio, then just stands there. Again, she is completely nude. I get up and ask her what's wrong, and as soon as the words are out of my mouth, she pisses all over my floor like a dog. Of course, the universe decides this is the day I should run out of cleaning supplies, so I make by now, midnight run to a 24-hour CVS, clean everything up, and then I can't sleep the rest of the night. Morning comes and I take her home. Never spoke to her again. Heard she stopped drinking and got married though. Oh goodness, my worst date was pretty bad. I was 18 or 19 and got set up on a date by a friend. I had just gotten out of a bad relationship and she wanted me to see a good guy. The man worked with her husband for the county police. He and I exchanged numbers, but don't exchange photos because we both wanted to get to know each other as a person and not judge based off looks. He was honest, told me he was a little bit bigger. When I hear a little bit bigger, I think a guy that is stocky / has a minor gut. Not a deal breaker, so it wasn't an issue. I was having some car issues, so we agreed to have him pick me up for our date. He sends me a text saying he'll be there in 30 minutes, which I appreciate, so I know how much longer I have to finish my makeup. 30 minutes goes by, and I think I hear a car pull into the driveway, but I wasn't sure. 2 minutes goes by, and I hear honking. Yep, guy is honking the horn to let me know he's there. Doesn't come to my door, or even send a text, he honks. I go outside and walk to his truck, and as I'm struggling to get in, I'm only 5 feet 1 inch, and his truck is lifted. I want to get right back out. This man was more than a little big, he was huge. I'm talking close to 350 big. I was irritated about that. Not that he was big, but that he lied to me about his size. He starts driving, and the conversation is going well, so no issues there. I ask him where we're going, and he just tells me, a nice, small and local restaurant that I really like. Alright, I can work with that, as I love supporting local places. We get there, and the place looks cute on the outside. He parks right next to the handicap parking, so we're really close to the door. By the time he walks to the front door, he's breathing extremely heavy, and is really out of breath. I'm trying not to show any concern, but I can't help but wonder to myself, how the hell is this man an officer? We get inside the place, and it's a buffet. I know that's not the worst, but I really hate buffets. I've just never liked them as I find them to be pretty disgusting, especially if you watch how people handle the food when they're getting it. This puts me in kind of a down mood, but I'm not saying anything because he said it's one of his favorite places. As we make our way through the restaurant, we get stopped multiple times because everyone knows him and wants to talk, slightly annoying, but fine. That is until I hear him introduce me as his girlfriend. That's right, our first date, and he's telling everyone he talks to that I'm his girlfriend. People would ask how long we've been together, and I would speak up saying it was first date and that we weren't actually dating. He looked like a sad puppy dog, but we weren't, and I wasn't going to tell people we were. We finished dinner, and he tells me we need to go back to his place real quick because we need to get some stuff for the second part of our date, but won't tell me what the second part is. We get to his place, and there are a bunch of cars out front. I just dismissed it as possibly roommates. He asks me to go inside with him to grab the stuff, and as we walk in, I'm greeted by his entire family. Mother, father, grandparents, uncles, aunts, sisters, brother-in-laws, nieces, and nephews. This is pretty much my breaking point, where I decided I can't keep looking for positives, and that there is no way in hell this man is getting a second date. As I'm meeting his family, they keep telling me how nice it is to meet his girlfriend. Girlfriend, there is that word again. In trying not to cringe as I talk to his family, but they keep calling me his girlfriend, no matter how many times I tell them that this is only our first date. His nieces were adorable, and one asked to sit on my lap and have me braid her hair. I'm great with kids, and won't say no to a little girl asking me to do her hair. As I'm braiding her hair, she asks me when am I going to become her auntie? That put me into shock. This little 5-year-old just asked me when I'm going to marry her uncle. I try not to show how shocked I am, and just tell her I'm not sure. Once I finish her hair, I get up and go talk to someone else. As I'm standing there talking to his sister, the best friend and his wife walk in the door. I find out at this moment our date is actually going to be a double date. His sister brings up marriage and does it really loud to the point where most people can hear, and it goes silent as they're waiting for my response. I just say this is our first date, so if it was to get to that, it will be a while. In my head I know it's never going to get to that point. My date and his best friend go into the garage to get stuff to put into the truck. As they're doing that, I get asked if I'm really wearing that. It's August, so I have on a cute tank top, shorts and strappy sandals to go jiggin'. I have no damn clue what the hell jiggin' is, so I say yes. Family members are looking shocked, and his sister has me a bottle of bug spray and tells me I'm going to need it. We get in the truck and his friend follows us. I ask him what exactly we're going to do, and he tells me frog jiggin'. I have no idea what the hell that is and ask him. Frog gigging equals frog hunting. For a first date, he takes me frog gigging. Seriously, please don't take a person frog gigging for a first date. He pulls over and his friends get into the back of the truck, and then he drives into this big field. He finds a spot and the three of them get all excited about finding some frogs. I'm pretty annoyed by now, but in trying to be nice, and I talk with the other woman there. Once again, the damn topic of marriage gets brought up. For some reason, this is a great thing to talk about on a first date for these people. As the lady and I talk, she talks about her wedding and tells me how they went frog gigging and caught enough to serve fried frog legs at their wedding. They also had hush puppies, sweet tea, lemonade, potato salad, black-eyed peas, and some other stuff. As we're talking about their wedding, her husband grabs the bat out of the truck bed, jumps out, and runs into the field. She must have seen the look on my face and tells me he's a taxidermist and probably just saw something. Sure enough, he found a fox and looks extremely proud of himself as he's walking back to the truck, holding this fox by the tail that he just killed. He then starts talking about his job, and I honestly have no interest, and I'm at the point where I'm tired of being nice because I'm being bit by mosquitoes constantly, and the date has just been hell. It must have become apparent because he got the hint and stopped talking. Finally, the date is over, and he's driving me back home. He keeps talking about how much fun he had, how he can't wait for a second date, and that he really likes me. Icing on the cake, he lights up a cigarette as he's driving. I really hate the smell of cigarettes, and my asthma starts kicking in. We finally pull into my driveway, and he leans in for a kiss. I tell him I don't kiss on the first date, which is a lie, and get into my house as fast as I possibly can. Late to the party, so I hope this doesn't get buried, but long story short, I crap my pants. On my first date, ever. I was 15 at the time and lived in the suburbs. A friend of mine set me up with an actor friend who lived downtown. He had striking green eyes and a sharp jawline, so naturally, I was excited to meet him. We met up at this Pan-Asian place by the subway line. The chemistry was decent. I'm a little bewildered to be on a date with someone this attractive. We ordered the same dish, a very spicy eggplant concoction, where all the heat was supplied by one single pepper. I've always had a tolerance for spice, so I dared us to eat our respective peppers. He spits his out right away, but me? I'm fine. I swallow the damn thing, and for a minute everything's okay. And then it isn't. Milk. I needed milk right away. I spend the next 5 minutes drinking glass after glass, to the annoyance of the restaurant staff, apologizing to hot actor TM, and then a rumbling deep in my bowels. Sorry, I'll be right back. In the washroom, my ass explodes in rage at my hubris, and I spend the rest of the date making frequent pilgrimages to the toilet, apologizing to myself, to my body, and to God. Spoiler alert, this doesn't help my chances with this guy. Finally, after a lot of prayer and toilet paper, I feel okay. We pay the bill and go window shopping, and since things are awkward at this point, we drift apart into different parts of an H&M. Suddenly, more rumbling, more rage from my sphincter. I need to get to a bathroom, now. It's a stage 4 code brown FEMA level emergency situation. There's no washroom in the store and no time to find hot actor TM, so I flee. Store after store denies me redemption, until finally, a confused clerk points me to his basement, where, as I open the door to his washroom, the gates rupture and I feel the warm, mushy sign of my failure. It's very messy. I open my phone. What do I tell him? Oh great, there's no cell service in this basement. That's wonderful. So lovely. This is my life. This is my first date ever. I am covered in shit, far from home, alone in the world, alone with myself and my poo. They say you find your greatest strength in your lowest moments, that trauma makes you stronger. So I persevere. I have to. Meticulously, I clean myself up until I'm halfway passable as a normal human being who is not covered in feces, and then I leave. I take the subway home. It's an hour trip back to the suburbs, a trip I make with a stoicism that would make Seneca proud. A friend, who I was supposed to see after the date, sends me angry texts about ditching him. It doesn't faze me. I get home, take a gratuitous shower, and text hot actor TM that I suddenly got sick. We never see each other again. I have never crapped my pants on a date since. I am strong now. I've told this before, but not in such detail, so here we go. I've been on a fair few terrible dates. Rebound plus Tinder is a recipe for disaster. But this one is universally known as my worst ever date and happens to have originated in real life. It's also my first date ever, which somehow makes it even more special. Bear with me, this is a long one, but I promise it's worth it. So I'm 16, stereotypical book-obsessed goth girl. No guy had ever shown any interest in me before, so I was super excited that this dancer guy I was working backstage at a production for suddenly showed interest in me. He actually asked me out to dinner, like in the movies. I was beyond excited. I wore my hair down instead of scraped back in my traditional plait. I wore a bit of eyeliner for the first time, and even wore a pair of high heels. Not even an inch high, but hey, to me they were a big deal. I met him at a reasonably priced chain of Italian restaurants and got off to a rather bad start. I had awful anxiety, particularly around food, so I felt sick and shaky as hell. I ordered a side dish of chips and possibly nibbled about 3 of them the whole time. He was devouring a massive vat of pasta. Great, really awkward, and he now thinks I'm anorexic. I definitely wasn't, but I was naturally very slender. He suggests afterwards that we take a walk down to the docks, which was a rather trendy area of town with a gorgeous view. I agreed. Anything to save this car crash of a date. And off we went. But there were rather extensive renovations to the city happening, and it took much longer to get there. Add on the fact I was in heels, and all our streets are cobbled. By the end of it, he was damn near carrying me. I thought my feet were bleeding and my facade of, oh these? I wear them all the time, was destroyed. By the time we got there, I just wanted him to kiss me and have done with it. And there is where the evening takes its own turn, such a turn. This is where my date becomes the star of the evening. He was an older guy, 21 to my 16. Mature, experienced, or so I thought. He goes to kiss me, you know, like they do in old movies, where the guy takes a step forward, pulls the girl towards him and kisses her. Yeah, he tried to do that. He fell towards me like a chopped down tree, damn near knocks himself out on my collarbone. Figured the hell with it, I'm here now. Crawls back up me and kisses me. Well, I say kisses me, but his mouth opened like a trap door. His tongue goes so far down my throat, it's like he's looking for buried treasure, and I can hardly breathe. He also has a cheeky grope. I'm just going with it, letting him get on with it really, but then I notice his breathing is getting a bit heavy. In fact, very heavy. In fact, so heavy that something happened. Yes, he came in his pants. I was shocked. This was totally beyond my area of experience, but I tried to reassure him, as the movies had led me to believe that he would be embarrassed by this. He wasn't. I'm not sure if he was blagging out or honestly thought this was normal, but he acted like everything was fine. In fact, he asked if we could sit on a bench and wait for it to dry. He was wearing beige canvas trousers, so it was really obvious and no hiding it. I said sure, so we sat there for about 20 minutes chatting, and me trying to get my head round the whole thing. So the sun is going down, and I'm getting really cold, so I kind of huddle into his side to stay warm. Then, I put my hand on his leg. Not up in the danger zone. Not on his knee, just kind of mid-thigh. Guess what happened? With a big shuddering breath, he did it again. I sprang up at once and said sorry, I was cold, my feet hurt. Could he please just take me back to the train station? He agreed, and we wound our way back into the city across those dreaded cobbles again. He popped me on the train, and as he waved me goodbye, all I could see were these twin stains, one down each leg. If you've stuck with me this far, then congratulations. I'm sorry for rambling on, but it's probably my most insane dating story, and I wanted to do it justice. My worst date was with a man who called himself Bruce. His name was not actually Bruce. I probably should have asked questions long before we even got to the date stage. This is probably going to be long, so bear with me. Bruce was an army guy from a nearby base, and after chatting on Tinder, because I'm a classy lady, he asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. So I thought, oh, go on then. He's cute, I'm bored, what could go wrong? We meet at this place which does fancy coffee by day and fancy wine by night. Right from the beginning I had this weird feeling that it wasn't going to go well. I got there and couldn't see him anywhere. So I texted him. Then he appears and says sorry, I was just in the toilet. He takes my hand and I think it's dry. His hands are dry. Not like just dried with paper towels or almost dry but the hand dryer isn't very good dry, but haven't been near water in several hours dry. I am 90% sure he hasn't washed his hands. Oh marvelous. This is a great start. We queued for coffee and he turned to me and asked what I wanted. I told him, then he proceeded to turn back and just order coffee for himself. I thought okay, that's fine. Not sure why he asked what I wanted, but fair enough. We take our coffees and sit down on this big bench that someone else has previously left. There's some empty cups and used napkins waiting to be collected next to us. We start talking and Bruce reaches out, grabs a used napkin from the pile of stuff next to us, unfurls it, and blows his fucking nose on it. Then he screws it back up and tucks it back in the used coffee cup. Without saying a word, I was trying to continue the conversation while also side-eyeing the snot-filed napkin when a waitress comes to pick up the empty cups. And while Bruce is talking about some army thing, he never actually explained I give the waitress a sympathetic look, because she 100% has realized she's holding a cup full of snot napkin. She looks at me, looks down at him, and probably went home to burn her clothes. He downed his coffee like it was going out of fashion while I sipped mine. It's good coffee. Not that I could ever show my face in this coffee shop ever again after this. And gets out his phone while I was talking about my current project at university. I tailed off thinking, he's probably not listening anyway. Then Bruce announces that his friend is in town and will be coming to join us with his girlfriend. I thought, what? This is our first date. I mean, it's also our last, but let it die with dignity at least. But I also hope that the introduction of 2 other people might make this awkward, snot-filled festival of UGG go better, and possibly give me an excuse to leave. I should have just said nope, I'm out, but I was still laboring under an attempt at being nice and not awkward. I had mentioned to Bruce in our messages that I smoke cigarettes when stressed, and I'd have a lot of work on recently, so I had a packet. He remembered this and says, "Oh, can I have one of your tabs?" And I thought, you know what, sure. Because if you go outside to smoke, I can sneak out of this place through the bathroom. I handed him the packet and nipped off to the ladies, before realizing the ladies' room was on the 1st floor, and there was no other way out of this building. Curses. And Bruce was still outside the building, so there was no way I could just walk out. Shite. Not willing to leap out of the bathroom window, and likely land in a large bin or break a leg, I shuffled back downstairs. I plunked myself down again on our bench, and contemplated all my life choices that lead to this point. Maybe I should have just stayed with that weird guy from my fencing club. Perhaps I'll become a nun. Maybe I'll invent a time machine, go back and murder whoever created Tinder, so this never happens. As I'm doing this, Bruce reappears and hands me my now half-empty packet of cigarettes. Do you want another coffee? You know what, fine, here's £5, just a black filter coffee please. He comes back with this black filter coffee and a beer, and none of my change, at 11 in the morning. Prime beer time, I'd say. Then the friend and the girlfriend of the friend arrive. "Sorry if I cough on you, love, I've got a bit of a pneumonia type thing," says this random bloke who's hacking and spluttering like something out of Les Miserables. Girlfriend sits down next to me, looks into my eyes, and turns away. Not a word. Shit's weird. Bruce reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out a tin while chattering away to this bloke, whose name I don't care to remember, chewing tobacco. Oh god, gross. While Bruce shoves a wad of chewing tobacco into his gums and spits out the last lot into another discarded cup, I didn't even know it was in there. Bloke is pouring a bottle of cough syrup into his cappuccino. Girlfriend has a 1,000-yard stare, and I think, that's it. Sent a rescue text to my friend along the lines of, "Call me, tell me you died, tell me you broke a femur. I don't know, I don't care, but get me the ever-loving fuck out of here." So she did. She called me, made up a presentation we had to work on like I'd forgotten all about it. And I dashed back in, and went, oh god, I'm so sorry, I have to go. He walks me out of the coffee shop, and tries to kiss me goodbye. As if his personality wasn't bad enough, he also had a gob full of chewing tobacco. I deflected with a head turn. I must go, off to do this important project. Like Cinderella wearing sensible shoes, I fled back to my house. I was texting a guy who came up to me very respectfully at the grocery store and said that he thought I was really pretty and would like to get to know me better. I show up at the restaurant, find him, and he looks really confused. I'm sorry, I thought I was meeting someone else. I ask if he's joking, and he's clearly not. So I leave, and he's texting me apologizing that he met a woman with a name close to mine a few days before. Kate versus Katie. I was upset, but we texted a little bit more for a couple hours. I calmed down. He asked me if I wanted to try again and meet at a bar closer to my place. I decided this guy's just kind of dumb, but there was no malicious intent, just an honest mistake. So I go. It goes okay for about an hour if you don't count the few racist impressions. He was complimenting me for a second and mentioned that he really liked my body. I got fairly uncomfortable and said, sorry, that kind of comment just feels a little forward for a first date. Let's just keep getting to know each other. Talk of bodies is a little too close to a conversation about sex, and I'm not really interested in that at this point. He keeps pushing it, demanding an explanation as to exactly why it made me uncomfortable. Keeps repeating, I respect women. I'd never hurt you. I'm just trying to pay you a compliment. Now I'm scared to do anything, even like hold your hand. I explain, I'm sure all that is true. I never said I thought you would hurt me, but we don't actually know each other. I expressed a boundary, and you're not respecting it. I was super shaken at this point. It was really uncomfortable for us both, but he kept pushing me, making me feel awful about the whole thing. I would have left at this point, but my apartment was in walking distance, and I was afraid he would follow me home on bad terms, seeing as boundaries weren't his thing, and he was fairly upset with me. What were you like, raped or something? Look him dead in the eye and say yes. He looks taken aback and suggests I get counseling, since I can't take a compliment. He goes to the bathroom. I rush to pay for my drink quick as I can so I don't owe him anything, but he comes back just as I was about to book. I apologize for my behavior, play nice, smooth things over, and we leave. He walks me home, says he'd like to see me again, and I agree. I kiss him tonight just because fuck this guy. This is the power I have, and I'm gonna use it. Also, I'm a little worried of what he'll say if I don't, but still. He texts me he had a good time and would like to see me tomorrow. I text him the next morning how I was willing to move past the first part of the night, but how fucked up what he did was, and if he actually thought he had a chance with me after what he said, he's probably the one who should get counseling. TL, DR, show up and guy thought he was meeting another girl. We go on date anyways. Compliments my body, I set boundary, he gets offended by it, accuses me to being raped, I had been, and says I should get counseling because I can't take his compliment. Year 2000. I worked at a carryout and a lady came in with a younger, attractive blonde. After they left, the lady came back in and asked if I would be interested in taking the blonde out. Said she was a German exchange student here. I said sure and gave her my number. A few days later, the blonde called. She spoke okay English, but not super easy to communicate. We made plans to meet near where she was staying, and the older lady was going to drop her off. The plan was to go to a movie, and then maybe something after, and she would call to come meet when we were done. We met at a Kroger parking lot and headed to the movies. The car ride there was a bit awkward as she kept repeating herself, but I thought it was the language barrier and wrote it off. We got to the movie, Pearl Harbor, and she immediately had to go to the bathroom. She came out, and we took our seats after searching for two together, wound up sitting in the first row. The whole time walking around, she kept grabbing onto my arm to seemingly balance herself. Still didn't think much of it. We sat down, and right away she said she had to go to the bathroom again. I said okay, but she told me she needed help. Here's where I started to worry. I walked her to the bathroom and stood outside for what seemed like 20 minutes, not sure WTF was going on. Finally, some lady came out and asked if I was waiting for someone, and told me there was a blonde lady laying in one of the stalls. Fucking great. Not wanting to walk into the women's room, I went and got a manager who sent a female worker in, and then closed the bathroom. I finally went in to find her sprawled out, shoes off. Purse spilled and puke all over. In her hair. Everywhere. The manager called a life squad after we couldn't get her up. They showed up. With the police. Fabulous. They of course grilled me, and didn't believe me when I had zero extension about what the hell was going on. The squad took her to the ER, where I spent the next hour waiting for her to wake up after they pumped her full of fluid. Her BAC was in the high 2s from what I remember. When she finally came to, she told me she was nervous to go on the date, so she drank some vodka. Must have been a shit ton. She called the family she was staying with. Once I saw she was okay, and had people on the way, I noped the fuck out of there. Never to see or hear from her again. That's the entirety of what she said to me on our date. Not a single word. I posted this story on another account not long ago, but I'm gonna post it again, damn it. So I met this girl at the mall or something, and I asked her out on a date. She said yes, and I agreed to pick her up at 5 p.m. on Friday. It's integral to the story that I explained to you that she is not deaf, and she was in fact holding a conversation with me the day we met. I park up and call her as I'm walking to the door. She picks up without saying anything. I say, "Hey, I'm here. I'm walking up to your door." She hangs up. I ring the doorbell. Her father opens the door. He says hello, then turns and yells for his daughter. Take a note here. Her father said exactly one word to me. After a couple minutes, she turns around the corner, and miraculously she's on the phone again, with someone else. Never found out if it was a guy or a girl. I didn't really listen to her conversation. I was busy crying internally. We get in my car and begin the 25-minute drive to a really fucking nice restaurant. This bill was going to run up close to $150, so you can understand my actions later. She eventually hung up after 15 minutes and immediately switched to texting. She didn't look up from her phone for the rest of the drive. I tried to make small talk. I was asking her about her family, her classes, when she moved here from ____, I don't remember where. The most I got out of her was a half-hearted I park up next to the restaurant. I could see her staring at the valet, wondering why I didn't get valet, but she didn't say anything. At this point, her father said more words to me than she had, and all he said was hello. So, I get out of the car. She doesn't. I walk over to her door and let her out. She steps out without thanking me and continued texting. I got back in the car and drove away. To this day, I'm not sure if she noticed me leave. She never called me angrily. She never texted me asking where I went. That was the last I've seen or heard of her. You can be damn sure I'm not spending $150 to be ignored for another hour. Bitch, you can call an Uber. Worst was probably as a teenager. I really liked this one girl, and we had been dating for a long time, but never really had any special dates, you know. So we decided after a while we were going to do something fancy. I made a huge plan like any teenager with a fresh driver license would. So we drive to this huge city an hour away, which was neat because it was the first time we'd gotten to go to it on our own. But driving in it was so scary. I'd never experienced actual traffic before. I planned on taking her to this nice hill that overlooked the entire city, and seeing if she wanted to lose our virginity together. So I'm driving these new roads, and I take a wrong road. I try a 3-point turn in somebody's driveway, and it's on a blind turn at night in the rain. I can see headlights coming around the turn, and have no chance to reverse out. So we sit in the car in this person's driveway for over a half hour before we get out. Then she's like, "Where are we going?" I was trying to make the hill overlooking the city a surprise, and I didn't want to tell her, but she kept insisting. So finally I told her, and she's like, "Oh, let's go eat instead." Okay, I'm down to eat. Where do you want to eat? She doesn't care. So I throw these fancy restaurant ideas at her, and she shoots them all down. I wanted to go somewhere nice because I actually had money and had never been on a nice date, and this was supposed to be a fancy date by my standards. She finally is like, "I really am craving McDonald's. Do you care if we go there?" Yeah, that's fine. I don't give a fuck at this point. I'm driving around in this city traffic, just wanting a break. We go and I ask what she wants. Nothing. She isn't hungry now. F that. I get a McChicken, and then we head back to my house because it's getting late. We hang out in my room and are talking/making out. I ask her what she wants to do, and she's like, "You know." I knew, but being the bitch I played it off like I did. "Let's try having sex." I'm like, "My whole family are just a room over in the living room. We can't." She doesn't understand why I want lose my virginity with my family the next room over. So I say I can't. She takes it so personal, like I'm insulting her, and insists I take her home. So I do. I tried talking to her about it on the way home, and she just refuses to speak to me. She's half crying and shit. Finally I'm like, "I don't know why you're acting like this. I don't get what the fuck your problem is." Dropped her off and left. She called me the next day and said we shouldn't talk anymore, and then that was it. I was pretty upset. We had been dating over a year, so it didn't make sense to me. Worst date. I knew a woman at the hospital I worked at who was a stunning fox of a mighty woman, at a whole 5 foot. No big deal really. She was absolutely gorgeous. So, it had been about a year or so that I hadn't seen her when she called the lab, and I answered and recognized who it was. We hit it off on the phone and I asked her out. She said hell yes. And I was ecstatic. So we meet after work, where we were going to drive together in her car to a party a mutual friend of ours was having. I go out to the parking lot and she drives up, parks the car, and waddles out of the car. She was 9 months pregnant. Ha 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 ha. That in itself was not a deal breaker. She was still a very attractive woman, and to top it off had gotten even more buxom and radiant. So we hugged and even kissed each other sweetly hello. With all the gosh you still look great, both ways, etc. We get to the party, and then it immediately starts going downhill. It turns out her ex, the baby daddy, is at the party too. And of course he's one of my best friends. I had no idea they had hooked up. So I greeted him, like one greets one's best friends, with a hug and slap on the back etc. And she freaks out and stomps away. Her ex is like she's in one of those moods again. Don't tell me you're here with her? I was like, oh, why dude? Man, she's F crazy. Run man, run away from that bitch right now. Ha ha ha. Then I found out he wasn't lying. Next thing I know, every female in the party is looking for me. I'm not exaggerating. Every single female at the party was looking for me, yelling my name, literally. So I run up thinking what is going on. And a group of them grab me and rush me to a room, where guess who is having contractions and wants me to help her. Well, I'm trained in medicine, so of course I agree to help. But she has everyone thinking I'm the daddy, and that she really needs me to be with her. So I get to the room and check her out, and she isn't having contractions at all, or showing any other signs of distress besides psychological. So I work on calming her down, and she's telling me not to leave her side, especially if I'm going to go talk to her ex. And by now I'm thinking, oh. So I settle her down and get her to talk to other women at the party, while I go get her some food and a drink. So she's happy again and playing the loving mama/lover with me, pulling me in to kiss her and hug her and talk baby stuff with her and the girls she's with, seriously, as if we're getting married or something. Meanwhile, all the girls are looking at me like I'm some hero-loving man who came in and saved her from having a baby by herself, psycho. So I excuse myself and get back to the party. Well, my best friend is telling one of his war stories, and he calls me over to share some of the stuff that happened to me. So a crowd starts gathering, and everybody is loving the stuff I'm sharing, and we're all laughing and high-fiving and having a great time. Me and my buddy are regaling the crowd with our exploits, and everyone is having a great time. And now even more so myself, because another woman has taken a shine to me, and has worked her way in between me and my friend, and put her arms around me. And next thing you know, comes a wild banshee screech. Marek. I was like, what the fuck? It was Prego. She saw me encircled by a crowd with her ex, and some woman holding on to me, and she decided screaming my name at the top of her lungs would be the best thing to do. So I walk up to her and say, what's the matter? And she said I was scared that you didn't come back, and I find you out here with that piece of rubbish. So I calmly walked her out of the house, and talked her down, and got her calm, and nicely suggested that she might feel better if she went home. So of course she got in her car and screamed at the top of her lungs while honking the horn. So I went back inside, to the sound of tires screeching down the road, and ended up going home with my fan. And that was the start of the best date ever. Went to her house, and we fucked all night long. She cooked breakfast, blew me, then gave me a ride back to base for me to start duty the next day. Great fucking date. Oh goodness, my worst date was pretty bad. I was 18 or 19, and got set up on a date by a friend. I had just gotten out of a bad relationship, and she wanted me to see a good guy. The man worked with her husband for the county police. He and I exchanged numbers, but don't exchange photos because we both wanted to get to know each other as a person and not judge based off looks. He was honest, told me he was a little bit bigger. When I hear a little bit bigger, I think a guy that is stocky / has a minor gut. Not a deal breaker, so it wasn't an issue. I was having some car issues, so we agreed to have him pick me up for our date. He sends me a text saying he'll be there in 30 minutes, which I appreciate, so I know how much longer I have to finish my makeup. 30 minutes goes by, and I think I hear a car pull into the driveway, but I wasn't sure. 2 minutes goes by, and I hear honking. Yep, guy is honking the horn to let me know he's there. Doesn't come to my door, or even send a text, he honks. I go outside and walk to his truck, and as I'm struggling to get in, I'm only 5 feet 1 inch, and his truck is lifted. I want to get right back out. This man was more than a little big, he was huge. I'm talking close to 350 big. I was irritated about that. Not that he was big, but that he lied to me about his size. He starts driving and the conversation is going well, so no issues there. I ask him where we're going, and he just tells me, a nice, small, and local restaurant that I really like. Alright, I can work with that, as I love supporting local places. We get there, and the place looks cute on the outside. He parks right next to the handicap parking, so we're really close to the door. By the time he walks to the front door, he's breathing extremely heavy and is really out of breath. I'm trying not to show any concern, but I can't help but wonder to myself, how the hell is this man an officer? We get inside the place, and it's a buffet. I know that's not the worst, but I really hate buffets. I've just never liked them, as I find them to be pretty disgusting, especially if you watch how people handle the food when they're getting it. This puts me in kind of a down mood, but I'm not saying anything, because he said it's one of his favorite places. As we make our way through the restaurant, we get stopped multiple times because everyone knows him and wants to talk, slightly annoying, but fine. That is until I hear him introduce me as his girlfriend. That's right, our first date, and he's telling everyone he talks to that I'm his girlfriend. People would ask how long we've been together, and I would speak up saying it was first date and that we weren't actually dating. He looked like a sad puppy dog, but we weren't, and I wasn't going to tell people we were. We finished dinner, and he tells me we need to go back to his place real quick because we need to get some stuff for the second part of our date, but won't tell me what the second part is. We get to his place, and there are a bunch of cars out front. I just dismissed it as possibly roommates. He asks me to go inside with him to grab the stuff, and as we walk in, I'm greeted by his entire family. Mother, father, grandparents, uncles, aunts, sisters, brother-in-laws, nieces, and nephews. This is pretty much my breaking point, where I decided I can't keep looking for positives, and that there is no way in hell this man is getting a second date. As I'm meeting his family, they keep telling me how nice it is to meet his girlfriend. Girlfriend, there is that word again. In trying not to cringe as I talk to his family, but they keep calling me his girlfriend, no matter how many times I tell them that this is only our first date. His nieces were adorable, and one asked to sit on my lap and have me braid her hair. I'm great with kids, and won't say no to a little girl asking me to do her hair. As I'm braiding her hair, she asks me when am I going to become her auntie? That put me into shock. This little 5-year-old just asked me when I'm going to marry her uncle. I try not to show how shocked I am, and just tell her I'm not sure. Once I finish her hair, I get up and go talk to someone else. As I'm standing there talking to his sister, the best friend and his wife walk in the door. I find out at this moment our date is actually going to be a double date. His sister brings up marriage, and does it really loud to the point where most people can hear, and it goes silent as they're waiting for my response. I just say this is our first date, so if it was to get to that, it will be a while. In my head I know it's never going to get to that point. My date and his best friend go into the garage to get stuff to put into the truck. As they're doing that, I get asked if I'm really wearing that. It's August, so I have on a cute tank top, shorts and strappy sandals to go jiggin'. I have no damn clue what the hell jiggin' is, so I say yes. Family members are looking shocked, and his sister has me a bottle of bug spray and tells me I'm going to need it. We get in the truck, and his friend follows us. I ask him what exactly we're going to do, and he tells me frog jiggin'. I have no idea what the hell that is and ask him. Frog gigging equals frog hunting. For a first date, he takes me frog gigging. Seriously, please don't take a person frog gigging for a first date. He pulls over, and his friends get into the back of the truck, and then he drives into this big field. He finds a spot, and the three of them get all excited about finding some frogs. I'm pretty annoyed by now, but in trying to be nice, and I talk with the other woman there. Once again, the damn topic of marriage gets brought up. For some reason, this is a great thing to talk about on a first date for these people. As the lady and I talk, she talks about her wedding, and tells me how they went frog gigging, and caught enough to serve fried frog legs at their wedding. They also had hush puppies, sweet tea, lemonade, potato salad, black-eyed peas, and some other stuff. As we're talking about their wedding, her husband grabs the bat out of the truck bed, jumps out, and runs into the field. She must have seen the look on my face, and tells me he's a taxidermist, and probably just saw something. Sure enough, he found a fox and looks extremely proud of himself as he's walking back to the truck, holding this fox by the tail that he just killed. He then starts talking about his job, and I honestly have no interest, and I'm at the point where I'm tired of being nice because I'm being bit by mosquitoes constantly, and the date has just been hell. It must have become apparent because he got the hint and stopped talking. Finally, the date is over, and he's driving me back home. He keeps talking about how much fun he had, how he can't wait for a second date, and that he really likes me. Icing on the cake, he lights up a cigarette as he's driving. I really hate the smell of cigarettes, and my asthma starts kicking in. We finally pull into my driveway, and he leans in for a kiss. I tell him I don't kiss on the first date, which is a lie, and get into my house as fast as I possibly can. She had just one picture in her profile, where you can't see any features at all, and it could have been taken anywhere on the planet. Somehow I still matched, and we started writing for a few days. She told me that she hadn't had romantic encounters for years, and didn't want to send any pictures, phone beforehand, or even send a voice message. I jokingly asked her if she is in reality a 2M dude, and want to steal my kidneys after luring me into a dark alley, and she jumped on the train and joked. Her jokes felt too specific though. She said, well, maybe I was a dude. And after that she joked about similar stuff. We still ended meeting IRL. I decided on a crowded place since it was a bit weird. And there was this small woman, and she was really pretty though dressed a bit boyish. We went for drink, and I told her jokingly that I am surprised she didn't turn out to be a guy, and she asked me how I would know that. I stated a few things, and she immediately replied, which is in hindsight maybe too much knowledge. Your voice is definitely female. You exercise your voice. But you don't have an Adam's apple. Nowadays they can be surgically removed/hidden. Not sure what she exactly answered. But those look real to me. Could be hormones. They were smallish. Nonetheless, I had great fun, and we ended up at my place where I saw her fully undressed, and what I saw that moment was a woman from head to toe. She declined foreplay though, and was really sensitive on me not getting close to her woman parts, and wanted to start right away with the action, which didn't work out right away since my buddy had a nervous fit. She tried to help orally, but SRSLY, that was the worst BJ I ever got in my plus 30 years of living, and we tried again after. She asked about 30x, if I like her breasts, and what I think of them, and if I find her pretty. The weirdest thing about the whole ordeal was that I couldn't get the Inzer angle right. I know every woman is built differently, and I have my fair share of comparisons. I never had an entry angle that weird. In missionary it was possible after stacking 3 pillows below her butt. After that she immediately asked if I can call a taxi because she want to go, and wrote me after that she feels like a whore, and that we should leave it at that one meeting. I was baffled since that never happened to me, and I treat every woman with utmost respect. I never slept with a trans woman, and especially not with one post-op, so I do not know how a neo-vagina feels, but something in my gut didn't feel right about her behavior and her physiology. The only real argument against it that I could find was the bad BJ, since me as a human with a penis do know how I would like to treat it down there to feel good. Until a friend said, you know that a lot of trans persons are disgusted by their biological genital, and are glad to get rid of it, so she probably never got a BJ or even thought about getting one. I wouldn't bother me to know if she was trans since that person was in my eyes most definitely a woman, but not knowing and wondering is so weird. First, a little backstory. I'm working in a college computer lab. I see my boss leave a few times with a truly stunning girl. She's tall, medium brown hair, big blue eyes, beautiful smile, great chest, just a really gorgeous girl. I'm wondering, what's he doing so right? He leaves early one night, and we get to talking. She invites me out to dinner, and being the lonely, awkward nerd that I am, I immediately jumped at the chance. We have an amazing night, got to know each other well, in multiple ways. Turns out my boss directed local theater groups, and she was in drama club in middle school and high school. He directed many of her plays. So, they're really good friends and all. That's cool. We date for a few weeks, things are going great. She calls me crying one night. They would jog together at night after he got off work. While they were at his apartment afterward, he tried to force himself on her and feel her up. I was of course righteously pissed, but seeing as how he was my boss, I decided to let it slide this time. So about a month in, she asks if I'm busy. She wants to go see a performance of The Diary of Anne Frank at her old high school. I'm okay with that. Sure. So, we get there, and sure enough the boss shows up. This was about a week after their incident. We get our tickets, and he decides to sit next to us, the girl being in the middle. As she snuggles up to me, kissing on me and such, he's just shooting me the foulest looks and grumbling to himself. So play is over. My date knows a good number of the kids in it from the local community theater group. She's talking to them, and they invite us to the after party. She wants to go, so I say fuck it. I'll probably get laid, might as well, right? So we get to this girl's parents' house. It's full of high school kids, mostly around 15 to 16. I'm about 23 at the time. I had a full beard and look older than I am. I was very out of place. I had never hung around the drama club crowd before. I now know why. I've yet to meet a group of more obnoxious, loud, hyperactive, attention-whoring people. No offense if you're into that sort of thing, but I'm not the sort of person who can deal with it. Just about as soon as we got there, the girl I was with got a phone call and walked into a room to talk, away from the noise. She stayed there for the entire 2 hours we were there. I was alone in this hellhole. So these kids are running around batshit insane. There's a brother and sister there. They were fucking weird. They were playing an improv-type game. People were shouting things out, and the people in the middle had to act it out. There was some very sexually suggestive behavior between the two. It was really odd and creepy. No one else seemed bothered by it, but I was very weirded out. Seeing a brother pretend to hump his sister is just bizarre. At one point I decide to go outside and have a smoke. I get about halfway through my Camel Light, and I hear a weird metallic noise. I'm looking around trying to figure out what it is. Sounds like change in someone's pocket or something. I see a giant shadow on the next house over appear. It's a dog. The dog steps around the front of the house and looks at me. It's a big fucking dog. Oh shit, son. At about the same time I register that I should probably be shitting my pants, this dog takes off full blast toward me, barking and growling. I run to the front door, open it, run inside, and slam the door behind me. The room falls completely silent. Every one of those kids turns to look at me like I'm fucking nuts. I'm winded, out of breath from running for my life. I manage to get the words, "huge dog," out. They look at me like, "What the fuck are you doing here anyway?" Then turn around and continue their weird little games. Finally, the girl I'm with comes out and is ready to go. Praise Jeebus. We hop in the car, and she wants to meet up with a friend. We pick her friend up, and I graciously offer her the front seat, since the girl I'm dating is driving. They decide they want to drive around and listen to music. Okay, sure. They put in the soundtrack to Evita. That's followed by the soundtrack to Spice World. That's followed by Grease. We're driving around for hours listening to this shit. I'm staring up at the sky through the back window, wishing as hard as I can wish for some ice picks to jab into my eardrums. I smell something odd and look up. Smoke is pouring out from under the hood. The engine is overheating. Fuck me. I get the girl to pull over, and I pop the hood. She has no coolant in the plastic tank. After the car sits for a bit, I open the radiator cap. It's dry. I just want to go home at this point, so I volunteer to walk to a gas station and get a jug of coolant. I'm walking through the hood at about 3 a.m. I'm feeling a mixture of fear and bravado, wishing someone would fuck with me, just so I could punch someone in the head. After about a half hour, I make it to the gas station, buy the coolant, and start walking back. I make it back to the car and fill the radiator up. The car runs fine. She drops her friend back off at her car, and we head back to her place. When we pull up, she thanks me for saving her. Of course, anything for a pretty girl and her bag. I lean in for a kiss, and she turns away. What the fuck? I'm tired, Nathan. I'm just ready to go to bed. I don't want to get anything started we can't finish. Not even a kiss. Not tonight. I hopped in my truck and drove home, smoking about 5 cigarettes on the half-hour drive. My high school had a foreign exchange program, where students from Europe would come over and spend several months taking classes in our school. During a stormy and hot summer, a very live blonde girl with a thick French accent showed up during the semester. I was afraid to get to talk to her, being awkward and shy, but that changed one night I was invited to a drinking party at a friend's house. This was somewhat rare for me, so of course I accepted. The night started out well, with a barbecue and beer, with people hanging out all over the house. His parents were loaded, and the basement even had a billiards room. After finishing a particularly good burger smothered in barbecue sauce, I was enjoying my post-manges reverie, and went to the living room when I heard music nearby. There in the middle of the floor was the French girl with an acoustic guitar, playing and singing. Around her sat a group of eager guys, along with a few disinterested girls. I stood in the corner and drank my beer, doing my best wallflower impersonation. She explained to them, she didn't look at me, that she was born German but her parents traveled between France and Germany often, so she had a hybrid accent and spoke both languages. Her velvety voice was amazing for singing, and her thick accent was tantalizing. As the evening wore on, I drank a few more beers, wandered the house, and ended up in the hot tub with a few guys and girls. We talked and laughed as the sun plunged below the fence and the air cooled. The rolling boil of the hot tub soothed my nerves and my muscles as I leaned back and just took the night air in. As others began to pack up and get dressed, she showed up in her bikini swimsuit and shot me a pursed smile, and asked if she could get in water, with a gleam in her eyes. I nodded and tried to act cool, despite my heart racing like a horse thundering around the track. We made small talk, and I tried hard to understand her, just pleased to chat. Her eyes were slate blue, and her hair a natural blonde, strands thin and white like thick spider silk. Darkness fell while we caroused in the twilight, and then rain poured from the sky. We decided to stay in the water to keep warm. She then asked if I wanted to climb an arbor, which I stupidly realized meant tree. There was an ancient and huge tree at the far end of the yard that looked at us with knotted eyes. How could I say no? We ran barefoot, holding hands, out to the tree while the night opened its bowels on our heads. The wet grass clung to my feet as I stepped up onto the first nook of the tree and helped her up. Then the light at the back of the house with the hot tub went off. Maybe they didn't see us out at the back of the yard. No matter, I pulled her farther up the huge tree until I sat, with my legs draped out over two close branches, and she pulled herself up and straddled me for support and to keep from falling. She leaned in close, her chest pressing against me, and breathed in my ear like a tired angel. To keep this from being NSFW, she adjusted things without removing them, and the lighting rumbled while fear of slipping gripped me. It was crazy. Anyway, she flipped back her head at just the wrong moment, and my hands slipped from her sides like missing a greased pig. She disappeared into the blackness with a gasp, and I heard nothing over the rain and thunder. I freaked out, adjusted my suit, and climbed down into the darkness in sheer panic, scraping my arms and legs on rasping bark. 1,000 scenarios ran through my mind. What if her back was broken? What if she died? I climbed down to find her on her back in the muddy grass at the base of the tree, sucking in air like an asthmatic. I leaned her up in horror, fearful that she was dying, when she calmed down, coughed hard a few times, and then burst out laughing, and gave me a crushing hug while whispering in my ear, "Don't you ever King let go of me again." I drove her home that night, and saw her only once more before her trip back to Europe. I spent the next 6 months convincing my parents I needed to do an exchange program, unsuccessfully. I went back onto Tinder and was desperate. It has been too long, and I was missing comfort from a man. I came across Elliot had this rugged charm about him. His photos showed him hiking, smiling under waterfalls, and holding a puppy in his lap like some kind of rom-com lead. His bio, simple yet intriguing: adventure, spirituality, and meaningful connections. Let's talk. I swiped right, and he messaged me first and quickly. None of that awkward, should I say hi first, hesitation. We started talking, and Elliot was smooth. He had this calm, almost hypnotic way of texting, the kind of guy who throws in words like soulful and authentic without sounding like he's trying too hard. After a week of chatting, he asked me out. "Let's meet somewhere where we can actually talk," he suggested. "Do you like coffee?" "Do I like coffee?" I basically bleed caffeine. So obviously I said yes. The cafe he picked was this tiny, cozy spot tucked away in a quiet part of town. When I arrived, Elliot was already there, sitting at a corner table with a latte in hand. He stood up to greet me, and I swear, he looked even better in person. Tall, broad shoulders, piercing blue eyes that made it hard to look away. "Lila," he said, smiling warmly. "It's so great to finally meet you." He hugged me, not one of those one-arm, awkward first-date hugs, but a full-on, comforting embrace that lingered just long enough to make my heart skip a beat. I sat down, and we started talking. The conversation was intense, but in a good way. Elliot wasn't like most guys. He didn't ask me about my favorite Netflix shows, or whether I preferred dogs or cats. Instead, he asked me things like, "What's your greatest fear?" and "What do you think happens after we die?" It was heavy for a first date, sure, but I kind of liked it. He was different, deep, mysterious. But then things took a turn. "So, have you ever thought about your purpose?" he asked, leaning forward, his eyes locked onto mine. "My purpose?" I repeated, caught slightly off guard. I guess I just try to live a good life, you know. Be kind, work hard, laugh a lot." Elliot nodded, his expression serious. "That's a good start, but I think there's more to it than that. Don't you?" I blinked. "More like what?" He smiled, but there was something almost intense about it. "I believe we're all connected, that we're meant to find something bigger than ourselves. Something divine." "Oh," I said, unsure where this was going. "Like religion?" "Not exactly," he said, his voice low and soothing. "It's more than that. It's about enlightenment, about awakening your true self." Okay, so he was a little out there, but I tried to roll with it. Everyone has their quirks, right? What about you? I asked, trying to steer the conversation back to him. What's your purpose? Elliot's eyes lit up. I found mine, he said, his voice practically vibrating with conviction. And it's changed my life in ways I never thought possible. Before I could ask what he meant, he reached across the table and took my hand. His touch was warm, almost electric. I think you could find it too, Lila, he said softly. If you're open to it. At this point, I was starting to feel a little weird. Not scared, exactly, but definitely off balance. Thanks, I said, pulling my hand back. That's sweet of you to say. Elliot didn't seem fazed. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. You're special, he said, like it was a fact. I could tell from the moment we matched. I laughed nervously. Well, I do have a great bio. He didn't laugh. Lila, he said, his tone serious again. Can I ask you something? Sure, I said cautiously. Do you believe in fate? I guess, I said, shrugging. Like, I think some things happen for a reason, sure. Elliot nodded, like I'd passed some kind of test. That's good, he said. That's a start. The rest of the date was a blur. Elliot kept steering the conversation back to these deep, existential topics, and while part of me was intrigued, another part of me was starting to feel trapped. By the time we finished our drinks, I was ready to call it a night. But Elliot had other plans. Let's take a walk, he suggested, standing up and offering me his hand. I hesitated. Oh, I don't know, it's getting late. Just a quick one, he said, his smile disarming. There's a park nearby. It's beautiful at night. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The park was quiet, the kind of place that would have been romantic under different circumstances. We walked side by side, and for a while it was nice. Peaceful even. But then Elliot stopped and turned to face me. Lila, he said, his voice low and urgent. I feel like I need to be honest with you. My stomach dropped. Oh God, here it comes. He's married. Or he's secretly 45. Or he's about to tell me he's moving to another country. Okay, I said cautiously. What is it? He took a deep breath. I'm part of something bigger. Bigger? I repeated, confused. He nodded. It's a community. A family. We call ourselves the Lightkeepers. Oh no. A family? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Elliot smiled, his eyes practically glowing. It's not what you think. We're not some weird cult or anything. If someone tells you they're not part of a cult, they're definitely part of a cult. We're just people who believe in living with purpose, he continued. In finding the light within ourselves and sharing it with others. That sounds nice, I said weakly, my brain screaming at me to run. You'd love it, he said, stepping closer. You're exactly the kind of person we look for. Open-minded, kind, searching for something more. I'm not really searching, I said quickly, taking a step back. Elliot tilted his head, his smile never wavering. Everyone's searching, Lila, whether they realize it or not. At this point, I was officially freaked out. But before I could make an excuse to leave, Elliot reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver pendant. This is for you, he said, holding it out. I stared at it, not sure what to do. The pendant was shaped like a sun, with rays that spiraled outward in intricate patterns. I can't, I started to say, but Elliot pressed it into my hand. It's a gift, he said. A symbol of connection. Of light. Thanks, I said awkwardly, shoving it into my purse. Elliot beamed. You're going to love the next step, he said. There's a gathering tomorrow night. You should come. Oh, I'm really busy tomorrow, I lied. Lila, he said, his tone almost pleading. This could change your life. Don't you want to find your light? I really have to go, I blurted out, backing away. But, thanks for the coffee. And with that, I turned and practically sprinted out of the park. When I got home, I immediately texted my group chat. Me guys, I just went on a date with a cult leader. Sarah, what? Jess, OMG spill everything. I told them the whole story, and they responded exactly how I expected, with equal parts horror and laughter. Jess, the Lightkeepers? That's the most culty cult name I've ever heard. Sarah, did he try to recruit you? Me, yes. He gave me a freaking pendant. Jess, burn it. Sarah, actually don't. What if it's cursed? I ended up tossing the pendant in a drawer and blocking Elliot on Tinder. But sometimes, late at night, I think about his face as he handed it to me, so earnest, so convinced he was doing me a favor. The date started with so much promise. I was optimistic, hopeful even, as I walked into the restaurant. I'd spent the last 2 hours getting ready, perfecting my makeup, practicing my effortlessly casual smile in the mirror, and convincing myself that this time it would be different. This time, the guy wouldn't be a walking red flag. This time, I wouldn't have to text my best friend an SOS halfway through dinner. His name was Ryan. We met on a dating app, of course. It's hard to meet people organically these days, and I'd grown used to the awkward dance of online dating. But Ryan seemed different, or at least his profile did. He was good-looking in a clean-cut kind of way, with a sharp jawline and warm brown eyes. His bio was charming but not over the top. Big fan of bad jokes, good wine, and spontaneous road trips. Looking for someone to laugh with. He messaged me first, which I liked. His opening line was a cheesy knock-knock joke, which I didn't like as much, but at least it broke the ice. After a few days of chatting, he suggested meeting up for dinner. I was hesitant at first. First dates are always a gamble, but he seemed sweet and normal, so I said yes. The restaurant he picked was a cozy Italian place downtown, the kind of spot that was intimate but not too fancy. When I walked in, I spotted him right away. He was sitting at a corner table, scrolling through his phone, and I felt a small wave of relief. He looked like his pictures, which is more than I could say for some of my past dates. "Hey," I said, walking up to the table. Ryan looked up, his face breaking into a grin. "Hey, you made it." He stood up to hug me, which was slightly awkward since we'd never met before, but I appreciated the effort. "You look great," he said, pulling out my chair for me. "Thanks," I replied, blushing slightly. "So do you." The night was off to a good start, or so I thought. The first red flag came almost immediately. "So," Ryan said, leaning back in his chair, "tell me something interesting about yourself." I laughed nervously. I don't know. I'm pretty boring, honestly." "Come on," he said, flashing me a playful smile. "Everyone's got something. Are you secretly a ninja? A spy? Maybe you're in the witness protection program." I chuckled. "I wish. No, I'm just a regular person. I work in marketing, I have a cat named Luna, and I'm currently binge-watching The Office for the third time." Ryan tilted his head, his smile fading slightly. "The Office, huh? That's basic." I blinked. Excuse me? Don't get me wrong," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "It's a good show, but it's just so overrated, you know? Everyone watches The Office. It's kind of a red flag." "A red flag? For watching The Office?" I stared at him, trying to gauge if he was joking, but his expression was dead serious. "Right?" I said slowly. "Well, I guess I'm just a basic girl then." He laughed, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nah, I'm sure there's more to you than that. We'll see." The second red flag came about 10 minutes later, when the waiter came to take our drink orders. "I'll have a glass of the house red," I said, handing the wine list back to the waiter. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Wine, huh? You're not a beer girl." "I like beer too," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "But I was in the mood for wine tonight." He smirked. "Interesting. What's interesting about it?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Nothing," he said, shrugging. "Just, you can tell a lot about a person by what they drink. Wine drinkers are usually high maintenance." I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard him correctly. "High maintenance? You know," he said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Like picky. Hard to please." I laughed, though it sounded more forced than I intended. "Well, I guess we'll see if I live up to the stereotype." He grinned. "I'm sure you will." By the time the appetizers arrived, I was starting to regret my decision to come. But I didn't want to be rude, so I decided to stick it out. Maybe he was just nervous. Maybe things would get better. Spoiler alert, they didn't. "So," Ryan said, spearing a piece of bruschetta with his fork, "do you work out?" The question caught me off guard. Sometimes," I said. "I do yoga a couple of times a week, and I like going for walks." "Huh," he said, chewing thoughtfully. "You don't really look like someone who works out." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ryan shrugged. "I don't know. You just seem more chill. Like you're not obsessed with fitness or anything." I put my fork down, my appetite suddenly gone. "Well, thanks for the observation, I guess." He grinned, completely oblivious to my discomfort. "No problem." The final straw came when the main course arrived. I'd ordered spaghetti carbonara, and Ryan had gone with the chicken parmesan. As we started eating, he launched into a story about his college days, which involved a lot of drinking, a lot of partying, and, according to him, a lot of women. "You wouldn't believe how many girls threw themselves at me," he said, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "I mean, I wasn't even trying half the time." "Wow, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Lucky you. He didn't pick up on the sarcasm. Yeah, it was wild, he said, grinning. But, I've matured a lot since then. I'm looking for something more serious now. Someone who can keep up with me, Uh-huh, I said, stabbing at my pasta. And I think you might be that person, he added, his tone suddenly earnest. I froze. What? I know it's early, he said, but I've got a good feeling about us. You're smart, you're funny, and, well, you've got a great body. For a wine drinker. I stared at him, my jaw practically on the table. For a wine drinker? He laughed, clearly thinking he'd just paid me a compliment. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. Excuse me, I said, standing up abruptly. I need to use the restroom. Sure, Ryan said, flashing me a smile. Don't take too long. I grabbed my purse and walked straight to the bathroom, my heart pounding. Once inside, I pulled out my phone and texted my best friend. Me, this date is a disaster. Jess, what happened? Me, he said I have a good body for a wine drinker. Jess, OMG. Run. She didn't have to tell me twice. I waited in the bathroom for a few minutes, trying to figure out the best way to make my escape. Eventually, I decided to go with the classic move, slipping out the back. I peeked out of the bathroom, making sure Ryan wasn't looking, and quickly made my way toward the exit. My heart was racing, and I felt a pang of guilt for leaving without saying goodbye, but there was no way I could sit through another second of that date. As soon as I stepped outside, I took a deep breath of cool night air and called a rideshare. While I waited, I texted Jess again. Me, I escaped. Jess, good. He doesn't deserve you. Me, never dating again. Jess, liar. She was right, of course. Despite the disaster that was Ryan, I knew I'd eventually get back on the horse. But for now, I was just happy to be free. As my ride pulled up, I glanced back at the restaurant one last time, half expecting to see Ryan storming out after me. But he didn't. I was back on Tinder. His name was Luke. His pictures showed a rugged, casual charm. Hiking in the mountains, laughing with friends at a bonfire, holding a dog. Of course, because who doesn't swipe right on a guy with a dog? His bio was unremarkable, but maybe that's what I liked about it. We started talking, and Luke was nice. Quick to reply, flirty but not creepy, and he seemed genuinely interested in me. He asked about my favorite books, my dream travel destinations, and even sent me a Spotify playlist when I mentioned I loved indie music. He was sweet, thoughtful, and easy to talk to. After a week of messaging back and forth, he suggested we meet in person. There's this great coffee shop I go to all the time, he'd said. It's quiet, cozy, perfect for a first date. What do you think? It sounded harmless enough. Public place, broad daylight, and I was in the mood for a good latte. And besides, Luke had been one of the most normal guys I'd talked to in months. What could possibly go wrong? The coffee shop was about 15 minutes from my apartment, tucked away on a quiet street lined with trees and small shops. When I arrived, it was late afternoon, the sun casting long, golden shadows across the pavement. I spotted Luke immediately. He was sitting at a table near the window, scrolling through his phone. He looked just like his pictures, broad shoulders, scruffy beard, soft brown eyes. When he saw me, his face lit up, and he stood to greet me. Hey, you made it, he said, pulling me into a quick hug. Of course, I said, smiling. Wouldn't miss it. We ordered our drinks and sat down, and for the first half hour, everything was fine. Great, even. Luke was charming and easy to talk to, just like he'd been over text. We talked about music, books, travel, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. But then something shifted. It started small. Luke began asking a lot of questions, more than usual. At first, they seemed normal, like, where did you grow up? Or what's your family like? But then they started to get oddly specific. So you live alone? He asked, tilting his head slightly. I hesitated, suddenly feeling a little uncomfortable. Yeah, just me and my cat. That's cool, he said, nodding slowly. Do you live close to here? I forced a laugh, trying to brush it off. Close enough. What about you? He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Oh, I'm staying with a friend right now. Just in town for a little while. That struck me as odd. He'd never mentioned being new to the area before. Where are you from originally? I asked, trying to shift the attention back to him. Here and there, he said vaguely, taking a sip of his coffee. I move around a lot for work. What do you do? He paused, his gaze flickering to the window for a moment before answering. Freelance stuff. Photography, mostly. Something about his tone didn't sit right with me. It was too rehearsed, too evasive. The conversation continued, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Luke smiled and laughed at all the right moments, but there was a tension in his body, a sharpness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. And then he said something that sent a chill down my spine. "You should let me drive you home," he said casually, leaning back in his chair. I blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Your place," he said, smiling. "I'll drive you back. It's getting late, and I wouldn't want you walking alone." I glanced out the window. The sun was just beginning to set, casting the street in a warm, golden glow. It wasn't late, not even close. "Oh, that's okay," I said, forcing a smile. "I drove here." "Come on," he said, his tone light but insistent. "You've been drinking coffee. It's not safe to drive when you're all jittery." I laughed nervously. "It's just one latte. I think I'll be fine." His smile faltered for a split second, and I saw something flicker in his eyes, something dark, calculating. "Suit yourself," he said, his voice suddenly flat. I tried to steer the conversation back to neutral territory, but the mood had shifted. Luke was quieter now, more reserved, and I could feel his eyes on me, watching, studying. When the date finally ended, I stood up, relieved to be heading home. "It was nice meeting you," I said, forcing a smile. "You too," he replied, standing as well. "Let me walk you to your car." "Oh, that's okay," I said quickly. "It's just around the corner." "I insist," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I hesitated, every instinct in my body screaming at me to say no. But I didn't want to be rude, didn't want to make a scene, so I nodded reluctantly. "All right," I said. "Thanks." We walked out of the coffee shop and down the quiet street. My car was parked just a block away, but the walk felt eternal. "So, what kind of car do you drive?" Luke asked, his voice casual. "Just a small sedan," I said vaguely, not wanting to give him too much information. "Nice," he said. "Bet it's easy to park in the city." "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. When we reached my car, I turned to face him, clutching my keys tightly in my hand. "Well, this is me," I said, trying to sound cheerful. Luke smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Cute car," he said, stepping closer. "Thanks," I said, my heart pounding. There was a moment of silence, heavy and uncomfortable. Then he spoke. "You know," he said, his tone soft, "you're really interesting. I'd love to spend more time with you." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, maybe." He stepped even closer, his smile fading. "I mean it," he said, his voice low. "I think we'd really get along." I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. "I should get going," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Wait," he said, grabbing my wrist. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "You sure you don't want me to drive you home?" he asked, his grip tightening slightly. "No," I said firmly, pulling my hand away. "I'm fine, thanks." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he was going to argue. But then he stepped back, his smile returning. "All right," he said, his tone light again. "Drive safe." "Thanks," I said, quickly unlocking my car and climbing inside. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Luke was still standing there, watching me, his hands in his pockets. When I got home, I locked all my doors and windows, my heart still racing. Something about the way Luke had looked at me, the way he'd grabbed my wrist, it wasn't normal. I blocked his number and unmatched him on the app, vowing to be more careful in the future. But the story doesn't end there. A week later, I was scrolling through the local news when a headline caught my eye. "Man arrested in connection to multiple abduction attempts." My stomach dropped as I clicked on the article. There was his picture. Luke. Apparently, he'd been using dating apps to lure women into meeting him, then trying to force them into his van. I felt sick as I read the details, my mind racing back to our date, to the way he'd insisted on driving me home, to the darkness in his eyes when I said no. I'd gotten lucky. So lucky. And I knew then that I'd never take another first date for granted again. I wasn't even supposed to go on the date. After a long week of work, I had been looking forward to a quiet Friday night at home, curled up with a glass of wine, and whatever true crime documentary Netflix decided to throw at me. My best friend, Rachel, had other plans. "You can't just keep bailing," she'd said over the phone, exasperated. "You've been talking to this guy for weeks. You need to get out of your apartment and actually meet people in real life." She wasn't wrong. I had been texting Ethan, a guy I matched with on a dating app, for nearly a month. His texts were perfect, witty, engaging, and just flirtatious enough to keep me intrigued. But still, I wasn't sure I wanted to actually meet him. Not because of anything he said or did, but because I'd grown comfortable in my little bubble of solitude. But Rachel didn't let up, and by the time I hung up the phone, I had reluctantly agreed to meet Ethan for dinner. The restaurant he picked was trendy but cozy, low lighting, soft music, and an air of intimacy that made it perfect for a first date. When I walked in, Ethan was already there, sitting at a table by the window. He stood as I approached, flashing me an almost movie star smile that immediately put me at ease. "Amelia," he said, his voice warm and smooth. "You're even more beautiful in person." "Thanks," I said, feeling my cheeks flush. "You're not so bad yourself." We sat down, and for the first hour, everything was perfect. Ethan was funny, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. We talked about our jobs, our favorite movies, even our shared love of hiking. But then, as we were finishing our appetizers, the conversation took a strange turn. "You know," Ethan said, swirling his wine glass, "this is going to sound weird, but I feel like I've seen you before." I laughed. "Really? Where?" "I'm not sure," he said, tilting his head as if trying to place me. "Maybe on the news or something?" "The news?" I repeated, confused. He smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, you just have one of those faces, I guess. Familiar. Like someone I've seen on TV." I laughed nervously, brushing it off. "Well, unless you watch news stories about boring marketing jobs, I doubt it." Ethan chuckled, and the conversation moved on. But something about the way he'd said it stuck with me, a strange, almost teasing tone that I couldn't quite shake. As the night went on, little things started to pile up. Ethan was charming, no doubt about it, but every now and then, he'd say something that felt off. Like when I mentioned that I liked to go for runs in the park near my apartment. "Isn't that park kind of sketchy?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Not really," I said. "I mean, it's well lit, and there are always people around." He smiled faintly. "Still, you should be careful. You never know who might be watching." It was an innocent enough comment, or at least it should have been. But the way he said it, with that small, knowing smile, sent a shiver down my spine. Then there was the conversation about the missing girl. It came up casually, almost as if by accident. We were talking about current events, and Ethan brought up the recent disappearance of a 13-year-old girl from our town. "Sad, isn't it?" he said, shaking his head. "People like that, the ones who take kids, they're monsters." "Yeah," I said, my stomach tightening. "It's horrifying. I can't even imagine what her family must be going through." Ethan nodded, his expression somber. "I read somewhere that they think she was taken from that park, the one near your place." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Really?" "Yeah," he said, his tone casual. "She was last seen there, apparently. Makes you think, doesn't it? How someone can just vanish like that." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Do you think they'll find her?" Ethan hesitated, his gaze flickering to the table for just a moment before he looked back at me. "I hope so," he said softly. "But who knows? People like that, they're good at hiding things." For the first time that night, I felt genuinely uncomfortable. There was something in his tone, something in the way he said "people like that," that made my skin crawl. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. But then Ethan started asking questions. "Do you walk through that park often?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Sometimes," I said cautiously. "Why?" "Just wondering," he said, smiling faintly. "It's a nice park, that's all." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "It is." He nodded, but his gaze lingered on me for just a second too long. The conversation moved on, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my chest. I kept replaying his words in my head, the way he'd asked about the park, the way he'd talked about the missing girl. And then, as we were finishing dessert, he said something that sent my heart racing. "You have a lot of photos on your Instagram," he said casually, picking up his glass of wine. I blinked. "How do you know that?" He smiled, setting the glass down. "I looked you up, of course. Isn't that what everyone does these days?" I laughed nervously, trying to hide my discomfort. "Yeah, I guess so. You have some great pictures," he said, his tone light. "That one of you in the park, with the sunset behind you? Beautiful." My blood ran cold. That photo wasn't public. I stared at him, my mind racing. I don't think that one's on my profile," I said slowly. Ethan's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "Oh, maybe I'm thinking of a different one," he said, waving it off. But the damage was done. My heart was pounding, and suddenly, all of those little red flags didn't seem so little anymore. I excused myself to the bathroom, my hands trembling as I pulled out my phone. I texted Rachel, my fingers shaking as I typed. "Me, something's wrong. I think this guy is dangerous." "Rachel, what?" Are you okay? Where are you? Me, at the Italian place downtown. I think he's been following me. Rachel didn't hesitate. Rachel, leave. Right now. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. When I returned to the table, Ethan was waiting, his smile as warm and charming as ever. Everything okay? He asked, his tone light. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. But I think I need to head out. It's getting late. Already, he said, his smile fading. We were having such a good time. I know, I said, grabbing my purse. But I have an early morning tomorrow. He stood as I did, his expression unreadable. Let me walk you to your car, he said. No, that's okay, I said quickly. I parked really close. Amelia, he said softly, his eyes locking onto mine. I insist. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to say no. But I didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to tip him off that I was onto him. All right, I said reluctantly. Thanks. We walked out of the restaurant and down the quiet street. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. When we reached my car, I turned to face him, forcing a smile. Thanks for dinner, I said. Ethan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course. We should do this again sometime. Yeah, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Maybe. I climbed into my car, locking the doors as quickly as I could. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching me, before finally turning and walking away. The moment I got home, I called Rachel, my voice shaking as I recounted everything that had happened. Amelia, she said, her tone serious. You need to report this. I'd been nervous all afternoon. I'd spent way too much time picking out my outfit, finally settling on a soft blue dress that I thought struck the perfect balance between effortlessly casual and I actually tried. Sean seemed like a nice guy, at least from what I could tell. His profile on the app was a little sparse. A few pictures of him hiking, hanging out at a barbecue with friends, and one where he was holding a coffee cup the size of his head. His bio was short and to the point, just looking for someone to laugh with. Let's see where this goes. He wasn't exactly chatty in our messages, but I figured maybe he was just the quiet type. Not everyone excels at texting, and honestly, that was fine with me. He'd been polite, friendly, and straightforward enough to suggest meeting for coffee, so I figured why not. Which is how I found myself sitting at a corner table at a lively cafe, sipping an iced coffee and anxiously watching the door every time the bell jingled. I hated first dates. The awkward small talk, the quiet moments where you're both scrambling to find something to say. It was exhausting. But I told myself this one would be different. And then he walked in. He was tall, taller than I'd expected, wearing a plain black t-shirt and jeans. His dark hair looked a little messy, like he hadn't bothered to comb it, but I couldn't deny he was attractive. His jawline was sharp, his shoulders broad, and those green eyes, they had a piercing quality that made me straighten up in my seat. When he spotted me, I smiled, relieved that he actually looked like his pictures. He gave me a small smile in return, though it didn't quite reach his eyes, and walked over to the table. Millie? He asked, his voice low and even. That's me, I said, standing to greet him. We exchanged a quick, awkward handshake. His hand was cold and firm, and then sat down. I tried to start things off on a light note. Thanks for coming, I said, offering him a warm smile. I wasn't sure you'd show up. Yeah, he replied, glancing down at the menu. Me neither. The first 10 minutes were strange. I tried to keep the conversation going, asking him about work, his hobbies, favorite places to travel. Anything to get him to open up. His answers were short, clipped, and not at all what I expected. So, you said you like hiking, I said, hoping to find some common ground. What's the best trail you've been on? He glanced up at me briefly before looking back at his coffee. I don't know. They all kind of blur together. Oh, I said, letting out an awkward laugh. I guess that means you've been on a lot. Not really, he said flatly, taking a sip of his drink. I smiled weakly, trying to mask my growing discomfort. He wasn't rude, exactly, but he wasn't making much of an effort either. It was like pulling teeth to get more than a one-word answer out of him. So, I said, desperate to break the tension. What made you swipe right? Sean froze for a moment, his jaw tightening as he set his cup down a little too carefully. I don't know, he said finally, not meeting my eyes. I blinked. You don't know? Yeah, he said, leaning back in his chair. I wasn't really paying attention, I guess. My stomach twisted. Oh, well, I mean, you must have seen something you liked, right? He let out a humorless laugh. I don't know. Maybe. That word hit me like a slap in the face. Here I was, sitting across from someone I'd been excited to meet, and he couldn't even pretend to care. "Well," I said, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace, "I'm glad you did. It's nice to meet you in person." He finally looked at me then, his green eyes sharp but unreadable. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Sure." The rest of the date wasn't much better. Every time I tried to steer the conversation towards something light or fun, it hit a dead end. He barely asked me any questions, and when he did, it felt like he was just going through the motions. And then there were the glances. Every couple of minutes, he'd glance at the door, his leg bouncing under the table like he couldn't wait to leave. Finally, after another long, awkward silence, I couldn't take it anymore. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. Sean blinked, startled by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you don't seem very into this," I said, trying my best to keep my tone neutral. "If you don't want to be here, it's okay to say so." Sean sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. He looked almost apologetic. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't want to be here." It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "Oh," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's not you," he added quickly, as if that would make it better. I didn't have a choice." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Sean sighed again, his shoulders slumping like he'd been carrying some invisible weight. "My sister," he said, his tone bitter. "She made me do this." I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. "Your sister made you go on a date?" "Yeah," he said, rolling his eyes. "Apparently, I've been too much of a loner lately, and she thought this would be good for me. So she grabbed my phone, downloaded the app, and started swiping for me." I stared at him, feeling my face grow hot. "Wait, so you didn't even want to go on a date?" "No," he admitted, leaning back in his chair. "I didn't." My stomach sank. "Then why did you agree to meet me?" He shrugged, his expression almost bored. "Because she wouldn't shut up about it. She kept saying I needed to put myself out there, or whatever. So I figured I'd just get it over with." Get it over with. Like this was some kind of chore. For a moment, I just sat there, too stunned to speak. I'd spent hours getting ready for this date, putting myself out there, trying to make a good impression. And for what? To sit across from someone who didn't even want to be here? "I see," I said finally, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound calm. Sean must have noticed the change in my tone, because his expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm sorry," he said quietly. "It's nothing personal. I'm not good at this stuff." I forced a smile, though it felt like my face might crack. "Well, you could have just said no." "I tried," he said, sighing. "But my sister's persistent. She thinks she's doing me a favor." "And what about me?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Did you think about how this might make me feel?" Sean looked away, guilt flashing across his face. "I didn't mean to waste your time," he said. "But you did," I shot back, standing up abruptly. "And for what? So you could check a box and tell your sister you tried." He didn't respond. I grabbed my purse, my hands shaking. "Next time," I said, my voice cold, "do everyone a favor and just say no." I walked out of the cafe, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and humiliation. How could I have been so stupid? I'd put myself out there, taken a chance, and this was what I got in return. But as I turned the corner, putting more and more distance between myself and Sean, the anger began to fade. Because honestly, at least now I knew. At least I wouldn't waste another second on someone who couldn't even be bothered to try. I promised myself one thing. The next time I went on a date, it would be with someone who wanted to be there. Someone who saw me as more than an obligation. And honestly, that's the least I deserved.